So as a kick-off, I'd like each of the panelists to just give a small introduction to themselves and just a little bit about why the data problem in telco is so important to them. And then we'll get on some, I think, some very interesting questions for the panel.
Hi, Prashant.
I was going to say ladies first.
Oh, I'm very, very sorry. This is the
Aleksandra.
My apologies.
Well, should I introduce myself first? Or?
Yes.
Okay, Aleksandra Jović. I'm a Chief Data Analytics Officer in Telekom Serbia. I'm not sure if you are aware the size of our company, and we are the biggest telco operator in the region. It's not a big region, and we have 4 million mobile subscribers, and the Serbia population is 8 million people. So, and we also have 1 million of fixed subscribers, and we deal with a lot of data. And the main problem is how to get business value from the data that we have. Of course, it's the same problem for everyone, but we hope that we are in a good path to.
And Aaron.
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Partouche, part of the innovation team at Colt. In the innovation team, we are working on the mid to long-term portfolio. So firstly, Colt is an international B2B, only B2B service provider. So I was explaining that in the innovation team, we are indeed developing our mid to long-term portfolio, and one of my focus is smart solutions. As part of these smart solutions, we are integrating what we call the advanced WAN capabilities, and these advanced WAN capabilities require that are required to be application aware, to provide this visibility to our customer, to be able to adapt to the different experience and requirements that our customers are looking for in the different smart solutions. So it explains why data is so key.
I'm Prashant, sorry.
Yes, apologies again for that. So I'm Prashant. I am the Chief Innovation Officer of Elisa Polystar and the previous co-founder of Cardinality, which was in the data domain. And before that, I've worked in other side of the fence at telcos, Deutsche Telekom, Telefonica, and 3, and kind of organizations in similar domain. And currently we are looking at, similar to what Aaron mentioned, 18 months plus roadmaps on where do we innovate more, LLMs and lots of new things basically within the organization. Happy to be here, and thank you for the invite.
I don't think telcos could be accused of not having a lot of data, but often it's siloed in organizations, it's siloed in systems, it has regulatory constraints. The sort of leveraging of data and getting more from the data is about overcoming some of those challenges. And I just wondered whether you could share some of your experiences in terms of overcoming those what I would term is data ownership, closed data networks in your organization. Aaron, if I can come to you first, you're looking at enabling developers to use data. How are you going about that in terms of opening up the data within your organization?
So in fact, I have a lot of different comments based on your statement, because you're right. I'm not sure we are leveraging enough the data we have, and indeed there are a lot of different challenges depending on which data we are talking about. But if now we more focus on how we could, and firstly, data, even the business data is not really moving very fast to the cloud. I mean, very, very minor data are moving to the cloud, and some of our customers are simply asking us, can you facilitate this migration to the cloud? So even the business data, I mean, we see this type of challenge. But now, if we talk about the network data, indeed, it's used by different parts of the organizations. We used to think that data is mainly for service assurance, while it could be quite valuable for providing added value to our customers. So we are looking how we could help through API, through portal. We have some experience. I mean, we are well known on what we call on-demand experience. So we have a portal and API that we use to offer to our customers. So here we are more talking about east, west, east type of API compared to the northbound type of API as we referring to the presentation this morning. But yes, this is probably the natural way to go to help developers to use these APIs.
And Aleksandra, you've obviously got a distinct fixed network, you've got a mobile network. What are you finding in terms of maybe just combining those sets of data from very different parts of the organization?
As I mentioned before, we are focusing strongly on creating business value, or business for our business. So to increase the ARPU, to customer satisfaction, etc. And regarding network data, we are of course collecting it, but and mainly use it as measuring performance, etc. And maybe smart way of investing. So we are doing some machine learning models for smart CapEx for investing into network, but we are strongly focused in this customer part and how to create this new value and how to create some better relationship with our customers. And of course, revenue is the biggest focus of our data strategy.
And Prashant, coming to you, I know you've got some sort of key tier one experience in terms of this challenge of breaking down data silos.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting question, and I mean, everything what the folks are saying here resonates. Generally, the organization, what we've been looking is probably like a 50x, 100x bigger complexity of politics and data sets. So there are a few things, key points I would mention. One is the buzzword silo. It's still there. Data lakes are like 10 years old. Cloudera came and gone. Houghtonberg's gone. Silos are still there. And I think that's because primarily of the ground up thinking. Most of the data structures are built middle out. Build the biggest data lake possible and then start dumping the data before you know it. These are dirty ponds, and then you're fishing for information, basically. So going back to, I think it's definitely needs to look at a very business value driven from a use case perspective. And one of the key points what we have been working with most of our customers is that you open the hood, every analytics system looks exactly the same. Collect data, save data, analyze, visualize, and do machine learning. It's super simple.
Yes.
And we've been selling, and people have been selling dashboards as analytics. That thinking needs to go away. It's both just vendor and the customer challenge. And the other thing is generally the idea of how you work backwards from a problem, but work backwards from a problem, but build ground up architecture. Because most of the people will do is they work backwards from the problem and they also architect backwards from the problem. So you end up creating like 5 silos, So these are the few things what we've seen. And yeah, I mean, you're spot on. There is amazing amount of data in telcos. And I think Google, Facebook, these guys have shown that you can build $2 trillion companies based just on data. That's what they have done. And so there is no reason why telcos can't use that and can't do that.
Very, very interesting. A lot of sort of reflecting on that, one of the, it could be an excuse, it could be a context, there's a lot of discussion in telco typically about privacy, sovereignty of data, and particularly the regulatory environment in which the data from a telco can be used. In terms of panelists, how do you see, or what has been your experience in dealing with those issues of security, etc.? Aleksandra, I know you've had you were talking to me earlier about data governance, and I guess I think this is really important, actually learning something from not doing it right the first time. Share with the audience.
Of course, I prefer these recommendations, what not to do, so don't repeat mistakes of the others. So we started several years ago a data governance program, of course without any practical knowledge what to do and how to achieve that, only knowledge from the books. And I need to mention interesting thing that there are at that moment several solutions that are, solutions for applying data governance initiatives, and for example, create data catalog and business dictionary and stewardship organization, but they were enough mature maybe to support some big organizations and big markets. And Serbia was really so small market with such small competences in that region, so we didn't have any consultancy in the area, neither in our organization. So it was so interesting that we entered the project just from a technical perspective as an engineers. And okay, we can do that. We know how to catalogize the data. We know how to create business dictionary. Of course, it's so easy. It is possible. So in 21st century, of course, we can do data catalog. And we started bottom up. So we started with all the data we have. We bought a solution. We fill it with the metadata and created catalog, and that's it. And everything was great in data lineage, and that was it. Without any real need of the organization, we were trying to push things up, and nobody actually understood why. Why do we need that? Of course, we are dealing 10 years with data, and we know how to do that, and nobody understood why. And we had a big problem for years that everyone, like in every organization, some silos, they have their own look at the data, and they have their own truth. So after a year of, I cannot say torturing ourselves, but it is really close to that, we decided actually, so I decided and realized that approach is completely wrong. So right approach is, if you have a top management that is looking at data from one point of view, that is the view, it is completely logical, but that was a glimpse of I don't know, eureka that I had at that moment. That was the view that any other silos must have. So we need to have top-down approach. So we cannot start from data in the data lake and data warehouses. We need to start from the data that drives our company forward. So what our general manager is looking at, so management cockpit and all the data behind. What are the data behind, data definitions, and all the rules? That is the proper approach. So everyone who is thinking about data governance, please remember this as, I don't know, one big, I cannot say mistake that we have, but start top down. And you, of course, like every successful story, you need to have sponsorship on top, and without it, there's no success. That is not an empty story from the books. This is a real life story. It can work, but with the proper approach. Nothing from technical perspective is. In a data world, you need strong business case. Whatever it is, even security or whatever it is, you just need someone who has some problem who needs to solve. So a solution of the problem, of course, engineering mind can do whatever is necessary to solve it. So it was maybe bigger answer, but I think it's something that is valuable. I would really like, if someone is interested, I would share whatever you need. And I need to say, even now, the solutions for data governance are not so mature for complex landscapes. We have pretty complex landscape, although we are not so big as, for example, Vodafone. And even now, we cannot find a proper solution for covering, for example, just data lineage in our whole architecture currently in the market. So this is the area that is growing, and we need to grow with them together. And also, meanwhile, we need to deliver business value. So it is pretty tricky. And
Prashant, I know you've got some experience with some multinational vendors, and with them having multiple countries, there are very different experiences of regulation. Could you kind of share with us some of the sort of scopes between, say, a big country and a small country in terms of what is necessary in data?
Absolutely. So some things I agree, some things I don't. But maybe we should discuss offline. There are data lineage tools. So very quickly on the tooling part, telcos are way behind in the queue of data. All these problems on data sets have been solved by other industries 10 years ago.
yeah.
Second thing, you see, when Henry Ford produced Model T and we started having lots of accidents, we didn't started shutting down driving cars. We started making cars more and more safer. We started building rules and regulations. Out of box started organically coming out. The problem with the data is it's so new, and anytime there's a data breach, and it's like, oh, this is all gonna go like this is, we shouldn't be sharing data. What I'm trying to say is that there's a fear factor built around data, which is an artificial fear factor. Most of the people don't even know if they have lost their email addresses, old passwords, what is the impact for it, you know? What I'm trying to get to is that there is a requirement in the industry to build more and more organic built solutions. And these technical solutions more or less are already there, because if you look at Google, we are sharing our data with Google for the last 20 years, give or take. And they've been operating in lots of these regimes where going back to your question around the data sovereignty, more or less every government in the next 5 to 10 years is gonna say, you cannot take data out of the country. It's gonna happen. No reason why, but it'll more or less happen. So we'll have these disaggregate, spread out clouds. So what I'm trying to get to is that like any industry, like planes or anything, when things started going wrong, we made those things better with regulation and with things. And that needs to happen in the data side as well. And going back to a very, very specific question on the thing, Vodafone had a very interesting story because we have got around 12 countries. So you have Deutschland where you can't take data out, and it's probably 40% of the overall Vodafone revenue in Europe. And then you have extreme cases like Greece and Portugal, which is very, very relatively, very small organizations, very agile, and a cost base is different. And this is where technical architectures comes into play. But trust me, the tooling and the solutions are there already. It might not be perfect. Of course, they need to be evolved. But there is a lot of things where telcos generally and the regulators needs to evolve their thinking about opening up and making data shareable is the only way to go forward, not shutting it down.
And Aaron, how are you handling the sort of regulatory and governance and I guess sovereignty issues of data? Because you're obviously a multi-country vendor.
And it's a very sensible topic. So I have several comments indeed. So I would like also to make the bridge between what Aleksandra and Prashant said. Firstly, we have to comment also on what Prashant said. Telco is not, we are not developing our business based on the data. So when you compare us to Google and Facebook, it's difficult for us because we are selling SLA, we are selling services to customers. Data is on top of that, but we are not really using this data to monetize it, so it's not our culture. So there's a real cultural challenge for us in terms of data. So we need to have goals. Coming back to what you were saying, Aleksandra, when you say, we collected data, but what for? So we need to have goals. And so I will give a concrete example on what we built. Back in 2017, we were one of the first greenfield segment routing and PLS networks. So with one ambition, we wanted to create a kind of cloud-like consumption network up to 100 gigs anywhere in our network. So more than 30,000 buildings and thousands of data centers. So we did that. We implemented that with some partners, Cisco, Axelian. We created a database. We had one goal. Then now the objective was for our customers. So the objective was to create a kind of what we call an intent-based network. So now a customer can connect to a SDN portal and request a greener route, lower latency route. And so we created this data. We then create another experience to our customers. And the last point is, as you said, regulatory. Very sensible topic for us, particularly for an actor like Colt. We are enterprise-oriented. One of the key verticals we are serving are financial sectors. So regulatory, we will be very, very careful. We use so far to manage only network data, which is not really the most sensible one. And we are really careful about the other type of data we could manipulate, and for that we try to avoid. Reason why at the beginning I was talking about APIs or portals, because I think we need to, it's very difficult for us to manage data that we don't choose to manage, particularly, again, I'm talking about an enterprise service provider, and we prefer to have interactions. I mean, if for any reasons we need to change, exactly like it was explained this morning by BT, if we need to change our SLA, we prefer to use APIs and then to have an intent or request coming and we change it. So this is a way to not be challenged by the regulatory aspect.
The data issue, quite another sort of issue is the whole aspect of data accuracy, and to some extent, particularly in wide area networks, which telcos are, timeliness is the data that you have is current. Prashant, you've looked at some of the aspects of the real-time data management in your solution. How are you addressing those issues of just making sure that the data is accurate, or that you're managing inaccuracy as well?
Yeah, that's any data scientist, the first line of query is quality of the data. That's the first thing before they can run the model. So you're absolutely right on that. So there are a few things what we do is real-time architectures are much loved in the industry, very, very hard to implement, very, very hard to maintain. And really you need smart engineers to keep supporting it. There is a lot of things what we did in our architecture, ground up. Again, we learned from what industry has been doing. Like streaming is not new. It's a 20, 30-year-old thing. Plus, we also utilize like a very simple thing. If someone goes and says to us, hey, is your probe data complete? Now, this is not like business data from bank saying you have to validate a postcode and a postcode has a rule. The zero is correct number in probe data. You don't know whether 0 is right and the 1 is right. So there is no business rule you can apply. So there are some nuanced machine learning things which we added within our data ops. Some of these things are like constantly being measured and looked at. Again, we kind of build observability within the data ops itself. Is it accurate? It's not. It's better than what it was 10 years ago, and I think what we are working on right now, things like why can't we create out-of-box anomaly detection as the data is flying in, comes into play. And the last thing I would say is the biggest challenge comes into market is 20% of your data is real time and 80% of the data is non-real time, or it's like IT data is like 1 week old, which you really need to enrich this real time data. So the moment you start building the big cube view of the world, saying I can dig in and I can slice down your perspective, the perception of different sides of things, that becomes even more challenging because you have got really, really old data set connected with a customer has already moved to a different plan, but data warehouse is still sending you 1 week old plan, you know? So that's something also challenging in this. Again, we can't solve all the problem. There's source issue as well, like there needs to be changed. But I think generally as industry is moving more towards cloud native, as streaming is becoming more and more organically accepted in architectures, these things will change. And hopefully as 5G is getting graduated to more cloud native architecture, observability comes natively, these things will evolve better and better. Like, you know, these things will come very, very natively within the platforms itself, basically.
So I guess the proof of the pudding in data is actually success in doing something differently. I know I come to Aleksandra and then Aaron on this one. What in terms of the projects you're currently running, where you're using data, you're bringing data together, what have you successfully done? What's changed for Telekom Serbia?
Well, that's a success in our area. I'm not sure can it be measured as a success comparing to other telco operators. We are not so typical. We don't use data typically in the network domain. We are already said, as I already said, use it more into trying to create this business value from it, and we are doing it in some interesting way. I established a completely new organizational part as addition of my team. So we are a formal organization that is supporting CVM in Telekom Serbia. So we are formally part of CVM, although I'm leading that team. And we are forcing every innovation into CVM that is related to data. So we are forcing and driving new data sources, for example, mobile traffic data. We introduced in the last year 6 machine learning models. We started in Serbia with the telco operator machine learning. We have it, we have 15 more in production. We started real-time marketing. We started a lot of marketing automation campaigns, personalization of the offering. So we are driving force for the CVM and for creating new value in our CVM. So this is not something that is typical, at least that I don't know. Maybe someone can share it with me. And we have great results, but it's visible that I have strong IT background. I've been working in IT for more than 20 years, and I think that technically everything is possible. So we can do everything technically, and also in data world, which is pretty more complex than just IT operations, standard IT operations. And the biggest issue is actually cultural change. And everything that we see now that is moving to cloud, it is not, those are not technically problematic projects. The cultural shift is something that is happening behind, and for the organizations that are not young, that are not greenfield, like starting from zero, it is pretty hard to change the organization that is used to do some things like 15 years in the same way. So this is the tricky part here, and I think, I'm not sure if it will be successful. Like, if I can imagine, we have everything on cloud. I can do that with my team, with data engineers and data scientists and everyone, but organization is not ready for that. So I think that is the same for every telco. That is not like something that brand new, some startup MVNO or something like that, but we will see, time will show.
Aaron, in Colt, where are you seeing the success with new ways of using data?
So for us, one key objective is to provide these advanced capabilities that will enable what we call smart solutions. We see a growing trend from our customers going to multi-cloud, trying to distribute application on different cloud platforms, which require them to better understand the application and correlate with the data that we have from the network side. Same thing when they are introducing new services like AR, VR for technicians or AGVs, and they would like to correlate the experience with the network data. So it's more for us to be able to be the trusted partner that will provide these capabilities. And so this is one of the key goals for us.
And Prashant, from your customers, what's exciting that's changed for them?
So we're part of Elisa Finland, and Elisa Finland is our customer, but also an operator. And I think they have been one of the torchbearers, and they literally shut down their NOC 10 years ago. It's called the dark NOC. If you go there are 4 people watching TV because you can't automate that monitoring. You have to watch the video, at least for now. And then, so that's one of the biggest success criteria I've seen, which has happened. And me having background on the other side, we used to dream of these things back in Telefonica and DT and stuff 10 years ago. And these are the things what we are trying to bring to the customers. But keeping aside Elisa, the other customers we had, like Vodafone's, and I think the simplest, from the network side, and of course, CVMs get much, much better when you start putting in network data, DPI data, because contextually your promotions become so much smarter, and you're not giving away a lot of free stuff to people who are not using that thing. So that's also we have seen in Middle East a lot of value we add is the CVMs, installed CVMs. In European operators, Francis, we have seen where consolidation is one of the biggest in quotes, digital transformation use cases, where, going back to my point, collect, store, analyze, visualize. You have 15 of them. You could do it on one system. Partially on-prem, partially in cloud, 100% on-prem, 100%, whatever the design pattern people are comfortable with. And before you know it, because when things go wrong in a network and everyone is asked, everyone's dashboards are green. So where did things go wrong? Where is the dashboard which was red? Is always the question, and this is where when you combine things together, silos go away, you've got like a centralized view of things. So yeah, I mean, these are multiple things what we have looked at, and last thing I would, one of the biggest thing what we have seen in Vodafone is use case might be one thing, but enabling data scientists, opening up the data, able to bring in third-party machine learning algos, or like I'm a big fan of data mesh architecture because it works backward from the personas, and it is a new. It does internally a lot of things what Data Lake was doing, but of course, because the tech is different, much more evolved, much more flexible, much more cost-driven, you can enable things to the data science people, and they're not, a data scientist is not starved of data. They can run a model on your laptop, but the moment you have to run it on a network, it's like, well, that's a one-year program because we have to go and build data pipeline, bring it out, and the story. So yeah, these are multiple things what we have seen within our mothership organization and other customers.
I think that nicely brings on to the kind of final question, which is if, in terms of enabling, is there anything you would share with the audience in terms of things we've already mentioned one of them, but the things you wish you'd known or things you've learnt by doing it that should be considered in terms of any data, big data or small data project within telco. Aleksandra, if I come to you again first.
Well, I was thinking about that. What to say that is not boring. Maybe the thing that I think the reason, one way how to achieve success is actually to have a proper person who would be a change agent in the organization, someone who can communicate the value of the data. And this cannot be a pure IT person, pure engineer, and also this person can't be pure business person. So you need to have some sort of mix. My own experience, someone who has strong IT background, but also business understanding. That's someone who can communicate regarding data value and also somehow to spread the value, what we can achieve around the organization, because at least our organization is I'm struggling with English, big and slow, and things are not moving fast, but technically we can provide everything. I don't know, some machine learning model, we need several months just to prepare data set, to train the model, to test and everything, but we have more than 10 months to communicated through our organization and somehow to explain why we need that and why and how to. This is so important, and without a person who is visionary and who can do some change, who can communicate that change in the organization, I don't think that we can have success. At least maybe some telcos with great general managers or C-levels, they understand it and can do these things, but I think that the data team should be close to the top management, and it is really necessary to understand how data can help and how to become actually data-driven company. It's not a buzzword. As fast as we understand it, it's not buzzword, the success will be closer. So it is not so easy to achieve.
That magic person.
Yes, I think it's really important. Yes, at least one. These promoters, that can be, of course, lots of them, and it's a good thing, but we are struggling with this. Cultural change is our biggest struggle. So technically, everything is possible, but changing a culture, this is a tricky part.
Aaron, your advice to the audience in big or small data?
No, but again, it resonates very well with what I'm thinking. I mean, we, as I said, telco have difficulties to really find the right value of the data. We could do much more. We have this cultural challenge because this is not what we are selling. We are selling something else. But maybe we should also think differently because we can do much more with the data. So what we are doing in our level, particularly in the innovation team, we are doing a lot of different pilot with partners. We are doing some pilot with IBM on smart manufacturing. We are doing some other pilot on smart city and smart buildings with partners to try to correlate the data of the network with the data from the application to highlight how we could provide a better experience, because it's a good way to show really how we could do things and how with the data we could provide a better experience. And again, it resonates also with what has been presented this morning. But yeah, at the end, I'm coming back to what Aleksandra said. We need to have maybe a cultural change in the telco sector, and maybe being a bit more creative in terms of business case, because we could create some consultancy, we could create much more with the data that we have. And again, Prashant was saying that at the beginning. There are companies that build their business based just on the data, and it's huge volume of business. We are absolutely not doing that, but we could do, I think, a bit more.
And if I can finally come to you, Prashant, what's your advice to the audience?
Well, I think all of our successful projects which we did in Cardinality and Polystar was very ground up approach, very, very grounded view of things. Machine learning, 80% is still data engineering. So the data engineering is still the core of it. I always say data ops is the most unsexiest problem to solve in the networks. And it becomes more complicated because we are dealing with billions of events. But again, it's solvable. It's been there. Now, the other thing, what I would say, 2-3 other things I'll mention is, what I mentioned earlier is, we are literally in the back of the queue, like really, really back of the queue telcos in utilizing data and using modern data patterns. Companies have done this. And even regulated companies like banks have done it much, much better. So those design patterns are already there. Those technologies are there, lineage, and these things have been solved. Of course, we need to adopt it, but we don't have to reinvent the wheel at all. And the last point I will make is, I always get fascinated with one thing. There are 400 operators in the world. They all work on exactly the same business model. They work, 90% of the components are more or less exactly the same, which comes from Nokia, Ericsson, Huawei, ZTE, core network, radio network. The business model is the same. We have got 7 billion mobile customers. We sell exactly the same. But we always, and this is my other side of the world, and you're right, like the operators, there's always a challenge, is I really get fascinated that 400 operators can't find value in trillions of data sets we produce every day. And this is a $1 trillion economy industry around the world. So I don't believe that those structures don't exist. I think it's the cultural problems which are there, acceptance of the change, whether can we really, those customer experience, creating better customer experience based on data, we've been doing this for the last 20 years. Other industries have gone and evolved it much, much better, and we are not ready to learn from it. So I think there's a lot of cultural change which needs to be done, and then it's this whole thing about, no, if it's not invented here, it's not good enough, it needs to be thrown away. But this whole grounded thing, basically. But I hope that kind of gives a summation of thing. Apologies if I've been too critical, but it's just,
I think that's very fair. Is that actually the real change in the hyperscalers, the Googles of the world? It's about a culture. It's a completely different mindset. About how you make money, where you make money, and maybe that's an important consideration. consideration in making that a success. I'm aware we've kind of hogged the question, but I wonder if there's any questions from the audience in terms of data.
Hear me? Yeah, you can hear me now. Hello. My name's Agim. I'm here from Applause. Having worked with different projects in the past with big data, especially within utilities or different types of utilities, one of the common themes that always came out when it came to big data, data lakes, all the data acronyms you can think of, is how do you centralize the content so that it's always linked to something that makes sense? So in essence, how are you talking about data in a way that it links to a real world thing, whether it's a person, a location, a mast, whatever it is. So within the telco space, that's always been a challenge. So Ofcom came up with this wonderful idea, which hasn't worked, but they came up with the idea to leverage geospatial as the common link to bring data together. So place or location IDs as common denominator across different data sets. Hasn't worked well, as you can probably guess. Yesterday, we heard talk about maybe using mobile numbers instead as a common theme to linking data together, whether it's people data or something different. Again, I'm not sure that's really the answer. So from your perspective, looking at the big data picture, how do you see the aggregation and the consolidation of that data in a way that can be translated to then be analyzed and derive meaningful outcomes and business decisions from it? Sorry to ramble on.
I can give you my perspective. It's much simpler than that. See, networks are built on standards. We can send you a call and your data because we know exactly where you're sitting. It's much the way how everything works in a network is already connected. It's built on a 3GPP standard. It's there. It's just that it's split across different planes. There are correlations needs to be done. Again, these are not hard things, but you have to. It's much simpler than going and working in a bank because these are all IT systems which were designed by business analysts based on business requirements. Networks are built on standards, otherwise they would not interconnect, they would not work. If you travel to France, we can send your SMS there because we know you're there. So saying that, I'm not saying you're saying that, but assuming that we can't connect the dots, it's slightly paradoxical, that we can send the calls to you guys, but we can't. So it's much more simpler than that. I think I will go back to the cultural thing. There's a lot of fear around what happened with, I still hear, I don't know if you guys remember, there's something called FORM, which happened in BT, that was back in 2006, 2007. Whereas I know in Telefonica, lawyers in Telefonica will still quote that in 2014. So there is a lot of fear factor, lots of things coming out there, but technically these are much simpler problem to solve.
Can I ask you a question as a part of the answer to you? What is the problem that you would like to solve with that?
Well, so the problem typically that I've seen is there's too many questions being asked from different parts of a business from a telco perspective, where the data needs to fit the requirements in slightly different ways. And where there's been for example, from a network perspective, people are asking very different questions of the data that is available within the business. From the CRM perspective and trying to build right products from a B2C perspective, different questions that need answering. So you've got this divide between, well, who owns the data within the business first and foremost? Second, what type of data do we really hold on to? Because you can end up having an entire database. So Tesco's was a good example of this. They had a database with something like 136 million addresses for Britain. There's 36 million addresses in Britain. So they had, 4 or 5 times the number of data. So they had duplication, they had loads of data errors within it. There was a lack of accuracy. But when you're feeding in different teams, adding into a centralized database, you create loads of these problems.
I can share our experience comparing to, for example, our strategy 5 years ago, which was acquisition, mainly focus on acquire new customers and the number of customers or subscribers. We actually focused, gathered everything around the customer domain. Now we are moving, the strategy is running around the household, so we are trying to collect data and to create some new sets that are gathering around the household and propensity, what is the percentage of the maybe customers in the same household, etc. So you need to solve some business problem, and the solution of that is the way that you will think about how to collect and how to organize your data. I mean, I cannot say some rule that can be applicable everywhere in the same company, but you need to have some business issue and somehow to see how to solve it. In our company, we had evolution, and I suppose it will be, of course, different regarding that customer part. So for other parts, for sure, you need to know what are you trying to achieve in order to support it technically somehow. It is not an easy question, so.
That's why Ofcom thought they were going to get to the answer with something exactly what you just said, which is if you leverage location as the link within the data itself, that's the one consistent. So people can move houses, people can move around the place, travel, etc., but location never changes. So they try to fix it that way, but it's not a universal fix, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's really great that you can use the location data. For example, in Serbia, this is no data for us. We can buy data from others. We can buy data from, I don't know, Google or UCLA, but we cannot use our own data. So this is a regulatory issue. Yeah.
Could I just very briefly say there's one aspect I think to emphasize Prashant's point is a lot of this is actually to do with culture. The data duplication, data proliferation actually generally happens because we'll go back to the original question, the silos in the network. So I think a lot of the opportunity to solve this is about creating common culture or common benefit. An example with one of the sponsors here today with Rakuten Symphony is that they tried to join up end-to-end the planning process all the way to the assurance process. Now, typically, they are completely different organizations, completely different data, often sourced in completely different ways. Their reason was that everybody in that organization needed to get benefit. The planners could only do their job effectively if the assurance people could assure it properly. That's not generally the case in all organizations. So I think it's about, I'd emphasize it's about bringing, where do I win when we bring this data together? When do I win when I deduplicate that information?